Hello and welcome to my small holding here in Northwest Wales. Before I crack on with my day, I thought I would take the chance to just show you around and catch you up with what's been going on. So we have lived here for just under 2 years. We moved here from the city centre, so we're learning everything as we go. And so far here on the small holding, we've got the veggie garden, we've got a new establishing food forest, we've got geese and we've got chickens. So I'll show you a bit of all of that today. So whether you are in a similar position to me and just like following other people's stories, or if you're a dreamer hoping for your own land one day, or if you just like looking at other people's gardens, you're all welcome. Let's go have a look around. So we'll start here in the garden and I'll show you a few bits that are going on. Now I'm currently in project get everything back under control because everything's been a bit busy outside of land stuff lately, so it's all a little bit out of control, but I'll still show you what's going on and what I'm working on at the moment and where my priorities lie. Everything is quite like kicking off now. It's that time of year where there's just growth everywhere, which is super exciting, and I just keep sowing things. I'm at that point now where I'm just like, I'll just keep throwing stuff in the ground. So here behind me, this is some radish that's gone to seed. I've just left it because I'll collect the seeds and I will resow them, or we'll eat the seed pods. Haven't decided yet. Also in this section here, I have got some tomatoes. Now most of my tomatoes are in the tunnel behind me, but one of the varieties did claim to be blight resistant. Now I live here in Northwest Wales. If you don't know the area, it rains a lot. It is very humid. I don't know if you can see at the moment, we kind of live in a cloud most of the time. The sun is trying to come out today, but we'll see if it wins against the humidity. So but this variety is called Nagina, and it did claim to have some blight resistance. So I have put a couple outside just to see how they do compared to the ones in the tunnel. So that would be a cool little experiment. They look okay at the moment, no obvious signs of disease or anything, so I guess we'll just crack on with those. I keep an eye on them and try and keep them well pruned because, as I say, disease is quite a serious risk here. So in this bed behind me, I've got some sunflowers growing, which had a bit of a rough start. Not loads of them made it. The slugs just loved them. A few have come up and they're starting to look good now. They're past the point of being slug eaten, I think. So we should get some sunflowers. And then along this trellis next to them, I did direct sow some beans. I've never had great luck with direct sowing beans or peas here. I don't know whether it's the birds or the rodents, but they just seem to disappear out of the ground. So I don't see anything coming up, but I have resown them in model trays, so I will be able to replace them soon. So hopefully we'll have some climbing beans growing up this trellis really soon. I've also put some blue Hubbard squash down the end where the sunflowers are, in the hopes that they're kind of going to trail around this bed, cover up a lot of the soil so that we've not got empty patches of soil for weeds to grow in. This side of the garden got a little bit neglected last year. I don't know what it is about this corner, I just can't seem to keep control of it. So I'm hoping that putting the squash out here means that, you know, even if there's some weeds, it shouldn't be the end of the world. And then with the climbing beans and the sunflowers, they can take the vertical space and the squash can sprawl on the ground underneath. The splashes of yellow you may be able to see everywhere. My neighbour gave me some calendula seeds last year and I hadn't actually grown them before, so I just popped a few in, and oh my gosh, if you have calendula once, you'll have calendula forever. But I'm not mad about it, they're pretty lovely. But all the tall patches you see that I haven't mowed is probably because they've got calendula in them, and I'm just leaving them to do their thing. As long as they're not in my way, just enjoying the beauty of having rampant flowers everywhere. Every time there's like a seed head that forms once the flower dies, I keep pulling them off and keeping the seed in. I don't know why. One day this whole field will just be one big sea of calendula. So then coming to this side of this bed, I have got some mini corn, mini pop variety sweet corn, which I'm super excited about. I've not grown mini corns before. I've grown sweet corn, but not like baby corns. So they've gone in, and I'm very excited to see how they do. In my last garden tour, I pointed out how my celery from last year just was refusing to go to seed. Well, it has finally happened. They've gone to seed now. If you weren't with me last year, I planted a ridiculous amount of celery. I have a giant bag in the freezer. I dehydrated loads and loads of the stuff, and there were still loads in the garden, so we used it up until the point where it's gone over, and now I guess we can start getting through my preserved supplies. I haven't grown any this year because we're just sick to death of celery. So as that goes over, I've got some self-seeded borage in here, which I feel like is going to be like a calendula issue if I don't deal with it soon, and there'll just be borage everywhere. I've also put a few cosmos in there just for some pretties, and then I need to decide what's going to go in this space. I don't know yet. Look who's come to join us. Hi. So I started some leeks earlier in the year when I started the rest of my onions, I think, maybe February time. And they've gone in this little bed here. I've multi-sown them this year, so I didn't do that last year, and I'm not sure how it will work, but I've seen other people do it, so I'm hopeful that will go better, because I feel like I wasted a lot of space around my leeks. I gave them loads of space. So I've tried multi-sowing them this year. I realise they probably will be a little bit smaller, but I think overall it's probably a better use of space, and we shall see how they do. They did super well over the winter last year, and we were using them sort of end of the winter, early spring this year before they went to seed, and it's a lovely thing to have to like bridge that gap. Our onions from last year stored super well. I was using them most of the winter, and then as soon as they were done it was kind of leek time, and then I've got perennial Welsh onions in the food forest as well, so between all of those things I think, you know, we're pretty good for onions, which is good to know after a couple of years. At least I can check one of the things off my list that I can supply for myself now. Right, so this is where the leeks are, and then down this side is on Project Recover. Lost control of it a little bit. I've put some beans in. As you can see, there's some leeks that have gone over from last year and more calendula. And this side I have mostly reclaimed. We've got a lot of spring onions down in this corner. I grew perpetual spinach in here last year and it went to seed, and I've just kind of left that situation, and I've got spinach coming up all over the place, which is pretty nice. I've also got a line of beetroot in here which are coming along really well. I did pop some dwarf beans in here, and it was a bit early, and not in terms of temperature, but it was where it's still so wet. The slugs just had most of them, so there's a few that are still surviving in there, but I do need to put some more in to fill that space out. I've also popped a few courgette plants in here. Now, on the one hand, I feel like courgettes are such a good food to grow because they're so easy to grow, they're so prolific. Last year I had 2 plants and we drowned in courgettes because there's only 2 of us. And this year I've already put 4 in, I think, and again, why have I done this? But I have done it, so I'll have to find some more courgette recipes. So anyone got any suggestions of how to use courgettes, I'm all ears. And down the other end I've got some annual flowers. I just wanted to give it a little play this year. I quite like the idea of doing some dried flowers, and then over the winter I can have play with arranging and doing things with dried flowers. So I've got some statice, some stock, some Godetio, that's just in there for a little bit of annual summertime colour, hopefully. And then there's some toad flax in there as well. Not sure where it came from, but it's very pretty, and so I've just popped it in. I've also got some celosia dotted around this bed. Again, I'm going to try drying it and give myself something to play with over winter that's a bit natural rather than just being inside, being miserable, waiting for the next growing season. Then down the other side of this bed I've got some red onions that were sown again back late winter, and then there must have been nasturtiums in this bed last year because I've got nasturtiums popping up all over the place. And when they're tiny little seedlings I think, oh, you know what, I'll just leave 1 or 2 to grow in and around my onions, but obviously it's nasturtiums, so they grow mega quick and completely take over, and then I end up having to pull them, but they're still coming up. It's probably going to be a never-ending cycle this year where I let them grow a bit, and then when they get out of control I'll pull them. Maybe one will make it to the end, and then it'll probably self-seed and I'll have nasturtiums in there forever. I am having flowers take over my veggie garden. And then of course there's some calendula in here because... Okay, so moving along to this next set of beds. So this bit under the netting here is brassicas. I had a nightmare of brassicas early in the season. Again, the slugs, you know, these can go out super early. Once they germinate, they can be out and deal with much lower temperatures than most of the rest of the things that are in my garden at the moment. So it was mostly onions and brassicas that were the first things to come out. The onions don't get bothered by pests here for me anyway, but the brassicas, everything loves. The birds eat them, the rodents eat them, the slugs eat them. So I had a bit of a nightmare, but I just kept sowing them and I just kept putting them in under these nets. The nets obviously help keep the birds off, but everything else can still get at them. And as you can see, some things have survived. Now the curly kale, that was a dwarf curly kale. In my head, dwarf curly kale would be able to fit under these little net tunnels, which obviously is not true, but we do get a lot of cabbage butterflies, white cabbage butterflies here, so that's why I have them under nets. But as you can see, it's kind of exploding out of its net, so it's less than ideal. Now right at the back there, if you can see, is where my brassica cage was last year. I've lost control of that a little bit, so I think that's my project for this week, is to get the brassica cage back under control, because I do have more brassica seedlings that I know aren't going to fit under these nets. Any brassicas from now on, I will move out there. Now there's a couple of other brassicas under these nets which are still fitting quite well, but I don't know what they are. Where they kept dying and I kept just replacing them, I kind of lost track of what was what. So they've got round leaves, which makes me think maybe out of the things I know I've sown, it might well be a Copenhagen market cabbage. The only other thing I think that would have such round leaves would be a Brussels sprout, and hopefully I wouldn't have been silly enough to try and grow a Brussels sprout plant under these tiny nets. But I've done sillier things, so we'll wait and see what they turn into. So the next bed behind was my garlic bed. I have pulled those. My dog chasing off magpies. I'm not going to tell him off. He doesn't catch anything. He just chases off the crows and the magpies, so kind of encouraging that, even though the barking is slightly annoying at times. Yeah, so my garlic came up this week. I've done a video on it which I'll share soon. They have come up too early, I am aware of that, so don't think that I'm saying garlic should be over. It shouldn't. I just had loads of rust here this year. It's been so wet, it's been so mild that we just had a load of rust this year. It is what it is, it's unfortunate, but ideally they'd have had another probably 2 to 3 weeks in the ground, and the bulbs were all quite small, which is a shame. I like to keep my own garlic seed cloves from the previous year, but I'm not sure that that's going to be feasible this year just because they're so tiny, and I don't want to plant tiny cloves that were too immature when they came up, so I'll probably end up having to get more garlic, which is a bit of a shame. But nonetheless, in that bed where the garlic has come up, I have popped in some asparagus that I started from seed. I was planning to put all of my perennial bits and bobs into the food forest, but as it stands at the moment I am out of compost, or I've got small amounts of compost, and I would have to make a new no-dig bed in the perennial food forest. And you know, the amount of compost I would need for that is quite significant, whereas on this bed I could just put a relatively shallow top dressing and get them in at least. I did start some from seed last year, but they got mowed in an accident. So I started again this year, so hopefully this will just be their bed forevermore now, and I will let that be. I may start more to put into the perennial garden next year, but at least these ones that I've already started are in, and they've got 1 year under their belt this year, and I can get some asparagus in the coming years, hopefully. Then further behind that you can see some onions poking up. A couple of them are starting to go to seed, which is a shame, so I think I need to take them out. They were the autumn sown onions, so I started those last year. They've been in the ground all winter and they look amazing, if I'm honest. I'm super chuffed with them, but obviously they need to come up a bit earlier than everything else because they've been in so long. So I reckon they'll be coming out this week as well, and the ones that have gone to seed I'll either use fresh or I will chop up and freeze for ready to go onions, and then the rest I will dry out and try to store and see how well this variety stores, because if they store well then I might do that more. That's the beauty of us having such a mild winter, is that if I can get these things in and done by this kind of time, then that's going to free up these beds for more food. I've still got time now. If I was going to pull these up and put some beans in or something like that, or more beetroot, more carrots, all of that stuff. So it's just using my space the best I can. We don't get loads of sun here, so the fact that I can use the mild winters as growing time, even though they don't put loads of growth on over that time, but they get that head start, because as soon as we start getting the longer days, they're already in, they're already started, they're already established. It's kind of like starting from sets. Then behind those I have another squash, there's some carrots in this bed, and then moving along we have got a row of beetroot, behind that a row of perpetual spinach. So I grow winter spinach, or like normal spinach, throughout the winter, the early spring, the autumn, but starting anything from sort of April onwards I'm starting perpetual spinach so that I can try and make it last longer before it goes to seed. And I've got some more salad greens, some herbs, some coriander, some lettuce and other bits and bobs. And then if you can see the trellis that's in that bed behind the spinach, we've got some peas in there. And I've done 3 successions of peas, so I've been eating peas for the last few weeks off of the first TP that I've done. The second TP is just starting to flower, and then that trellis is my 3rd succession, and they are just starting to cling to the trellis itself. So I think we will be in peas for the rest of the summer. They are sugar snouts because I don't want to have to pod peas every time I want to eat peas. At least these I can just grab and I can chuck in anything. I'm enjoying them quite a lot with just some poached eggs and dipping in my just really quickly sauteed up with some fresh garlic. Dipped into a poached egg. gold. In this bed I did have a load of perpetual spinach from last year, which I've just hacked down and kind of left in the bed for now. I tend to do that if I don't have the next thing ready to go in. I needed to take them out because I didn't want them to go to seed. I don't need perpetual spinach volunteering it in every single bed. So I have just popped those down and left them on the soil because it just covers up that soil. It stops any weed seeds from getting in there. So as soon as I've got the next thing, I'll be able to take those out, top dress with a little bit of compost. They can go into the compost pile and decompose properly, but it just stops this bed from being exposed with bare soil while I'm working out what's going to go in there next. Otherwise, I've got some shallots in there and some dill. It's first year growing dill. I've not had any yet, but I think I probably should. And then there's another courgette, because apparently I'm putting courgettes everywhere. Down this far end of this long bed that's got my rows of beetroot, spinach and then peas behind it. Down this end I've put some climbing beans in. If you were with me last year, I had a bit of a nightmare with climbing beans. We had some really significant stormy weather, like really high winds, and anything growing up just didn't do well at all. So I wasn't going to bother this year, but the weather has been a lot more forgiving. My peas are doing fine. You know, last year everything tumbled, basically. No matter how secure a structure I built, everything went over. So I kind of had given up the thought of doing that, but honestly it's okay this year. So I've hedged my bets and I popped a few climbing beans in here, and again, as I said, I'm going to try and do it over there where the sunflowers are, and we'll see how that goes. One of them is just starting to climb up the trellis, so I'm quite excited about that because I love beans. I did a lot of dwarf beans last year, but I just love how much food you get for the space they take on a climbing bean, so fingers crossed that goes okay. And then at the very end of this bed I popped in some zinnias and another celosia and another dill because I had them and I had space. So this bed here is my last bit of outside annual growing space to show you today, and this has my sweet corn in it. So this is my same sweet corn patch I used last year, and I was surprised at how well it went. I got tons of sweet corn last year, and these took an absolutely royal battering from the wind last year, to the point where they were completely flat to the ground on multiple occasions, and I thought, that's just never going to work. They're not coming back from this. And they did every time. And as I say, we got a reasonable harvest. So I intended to grow 2 different varieties of sweet corn this year, and I was wondering how I was going to keep those separate because they do cross-pollinate. Turned out not to be a problem at all, because one of my varieties was, I didn't know where the seeds came from, but I found them, and I thought, if I'm not going to grow them this year, then what's the point in holding on to them? They didn't come up, they must have been very old. So either way, I re-sowed some of the original variety. This is Gold Crest, which is also what I grew last year, so at least I know that it does well okay here. So as you can if you can see, I've got 3 kind of successions. The first set, the second set, and the third set. The third set was sown when I realised the Sundance wasn't coming up. But that's given me at least enough plants to fill out this 4x4 metre space. And then I am going to put some squash in here just to go between the stalks of the corn, try and keep the weeds down. I do have a fair bit of bindweed in this area. I don't suffer with it too much in the rest of the garden. I do in the food forest, but not in this annual garden field. But I do get it here, so I'm trying to really keep on top of it, keep this really well mulched. But the corn deals okay with the weeds. I mean, as long as I don't let it get too out of hand, once they're established enough, they can deal with a bit of weed pressure. So as long as I keep them reasonably well mulched, I think we should be okay. This polytunnel is new this year. We built it sort of April time this year, so we got a little bit of a late start, but oh my god, this is a game changer. I'm absolutely loving having the tunnel. There is so much life in here. I swear every time I come in here, you can actually see the difference in each plant. So we did install a soaker hose irrigation in here, and oh my gosh, I don't think anything in here would be alive without it. We live in a place with so much rain. Since I've moved here, I don't think I've had to water my garden, except for when I'm literally, transplanting things into the ground. I water them in, but then I don't generally water. If I do, it's usually just like 1 watering can to try and keep some direct sown carrot seeds or something moist enough. I'm not watering plants, whereas obviously as soon as you're undercover, you're kind of negating the rain a bit, especially when they're young. Kind of judgment calling how much to use it, but it's helpful if I'm ever not here, that I can tell someone to just, come in here and put it on for half an hour. At least I know that things are getting watered. I'd rather them get a little bit overwatered in periods just for a day here and there, rather than not get watered for a day when it's going to be swelteringly hot in here and everything's going to dry out. So, where do we start? Start with tomatoes. I'd say the downside to it in here is that I seem to get eaten a lot, like flies and stuff. Right, so down this whole line I have rows of tomatoes. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bloody butchers. They seem to be the furthest along. We've got some fruits on those. The leaves are a bit curly. They still seem to be growing, and the new leaves that are coming out look less bad. So I wonder if it was the temperature fluctuations early on when they were in here. But I'll keep an eye on them. I'm feeding them once a week now because they have set fruit. So then as I work down this row, I've got the bloody butchers. They are indeterminate. They all have their own cane that they're growing up. Behind that, I've got some cerise saligia. They are supposedly determinate, but they're growing super tall. They're the tallest things in here. So I'm leaving them some side shoots. They have these ridiculously huge bunches of flowers. The trusses are insane. So I'll be super interested to see how they actually come out. And then behind those, we've got a few sweet million, again indeterminate cherry tomatoes, which seem to be doing okay. And then down in the bottom corner, I have 5 Roma plants, which are determinate. I am pruning them sparingly, just trying to keep any risk of disease low. But they are determinate, so I'm trying not to take too much off of them. Just anywhere where it's touching the soil or where it looks really compacted and there's no airflow, I am thinning them out a little bit here and there. Then along the back wall, I've got 2 grapevines which I popped in the ground, which were in pots all last year and got a bit neglected. So I'm glad to see that they're alive and starting to put on some growth. So hopefully within a few years they'll start to grow up and over this tunnel. Hopefully give it a little bit of shade, and then maybe we'll get some grapes. North Wales isn't really known for its grapes, so we'll see what comes of that. In front of these tomatoes here, I have a variety of different pepper plants. I've got some hot peppers and some bell peppers. The bell peppers are all California Wonder. The varieties of hot peppers in here are Cigaretta, Carolina Reapers, Anaheim, and jalapenos. So quite a variety of peppers in here, and we'll see how they do. We're starting to get flowers with some tiny baby fruits, so hopefully we'll get some pepper harvest out of here this year as well. Now down in the middle aisle, this humongous amount of bush here are my tomatillos. Now they were the first thing to go in here, and they are huge and they look quite fabulous, but they don't seem to be setting any fruit. Like the flowers are dropping, and I'm not really sure why that is. So they're in front of this doorway here, and I usually have this open on like any vaguely sunny day because it does get hot in here. So they do get like a bit of breeze. There's a lot of flies and bugs and stuff in here, so I would think that it shouldn't be a pollination issue. There are four of them in here, so that should be enough for there to be pollination partners. I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. If anyone has any ideas as to why that would be happening, please do let me know. So behind the tomatillos in this middle row, I have a cucumber trellis. I have mostly crystal lemon cucumbers growing up there. We have had a few and they have been delicious. Absolutely love homegrown cucumbers. Again, last year they could not handle being outside here. The wind was just too much. You know, they're quite delicate, especially when they're young. They're just looking for reasons to die. So I tried repeatedly again and again last year and had no luck with cucumbers. So I'm so happy that we're finally getting cucumbers in here. I think this one down here is an Armenian yard long, and there's another over there. So hopefully we'll get to try some of those soon because I've never grown that variety. And then in this bit in the middle between all of the cucumbers is my San Marzano tomatoes. So they're going to be for preserving and jarring up into sauces and things like that. And they seem to be coming along quite well. They're quite funny looking tomato plants. Let me show you what I mean. So I don't know how obvious it is, but when you look at like all the trusses are neither a truss nor a leaf branch. Like you see here, this is a truss, yeah, it's got flowers and then it's got leaves. And same with this one, it's got flowers, it's even got some fruit starting on it, and then it's got leaves. Flowers on a branch and then leaves on the same branch. I can't really decide what's going on. Flowers, so I think it's going to be a fruit truss, and then it's got this whole extra branch of leaves coming off the end. It's not just one of these plants, it's most of them. Is that a normal for a San Marzano tomato? I've never grown this variety before, so I've actually never seen it. Usually it's either a leaf branch or a truss of fruit. These seem to be both. I've just never seen it. If that's normal, then tell me, because I am intrigued. Yeah, the cucumbers are just insane in their growth. We are having so many, and the plants are continuing to just branch out in all directions. So I think we'll probably be good for cucumbers for a while. I've also started a market more cucumber on this side as well. So, you know, we're getting a lot of crystal lemons now. Hopefully the Armenian yardlong will come in soon, and then we'll have market more hopefully to finish out the season, and we should be in cucumbers fresh all summer long, which is awesome. Okay, and then behind the cucumbers I have another few sets of tomato plants. In those sets I have some Nagina, which is the same variety as the ones growing outside, so they're my control study for how blight resistant they are and how well they do as an outside variety, because obviously it's a much more controlled environment in here. And then I've got some other bits and bobs of the other varieties that I just had extras and ended up throwing them in. Same on this side. I thought these were Romas. They're starting to grow upwards. I can't decide which they are, so I'm just leaving them in, and I'm vaguely training them to a cane, and we'll see how they do. In front of this side of tomatoes I have some basil. Now, with varying success. The Genovese basil started off looking great, but something has taken a liking to it, and it's looking rougher every time I come in here. But that being said, the Thai basil looks good. I don't know if that's just hardier, if it's less appealing to the bugs, but I quite like the flavour, so it's not the end of the world if I know that Thai basil does better here. Behind this row here I have some national gherkin cucumbers, I think that's what they're called. I've got 2 plants of those. They were really small to start, but they do seem to be putting on some growth now, so hopefully I'll be doing some pickles with those. I'm not a huge pickle fan, but Nigel loves them, so I thought that would be a nice little treat that I can do for him if these plants do fruit, and it looks like they're on their way, so feeling good about that. Now what I also have in here are some, I think the variety is petite yellow watermelons. Now I started them indoors ages ago and they barely did anything. I thought, you know, that's a write-off, that is what it is. And then I was going away for a weekend or something, and I thought, there's no point in me leaving like tiny unpotted up things in my house. So I thought, you know what, I'll just bung them in the tunnel, I've got space. And 2 out of 3 seem to actually be taking off now. So I don't know if I'm going to have time for them to actually come to anything, but they are starting to put on some growth, so I am going to wait and see. This little one has obviously not chosen the path of life, which is fine. I've still got 2 growing, so fingers crossed I'll have some little baby watermelons before too long. Whew, I'm glad I came out earlier because it is getting warm in here. So the last thing to show you in here is down this end I have more peppers. These are mostly sweet peppers down here, so they are California Wonder, which are a little bit behind everything else, but they went in a lot later. I started them only once I knew I was getting the Polytunnel, so the seeds didn't start till probably late March, so we might not get anything out of those. It is asking quite a lot. Usually I'd start my peppers early inside, but that's just the way that it was this year. And then we've got our extra celosia in here, which was masquerading as a pepper, which is how it got planted in here, but it's about 10 times the size of the ones outside, so obviously celosia likes itself some heat. Right, and then back on the unit back there, I've got my garlic drying out. I won't leave it in here for long. This was just to do a couple of days worth of letting all the dirt and stuff dry out, that I can brush those off, and then I can work out how I'm going to store those. I'm also going to weigh them all and things so I can see how well they've done in comparison to each other. My glasses are fogging up. Here, there and everywhere on the floor I'm kind of starting seeds, which this has been such a useful space for starting seeds. My house here is like a little cottage. It's quite small. We don't have loads of space, and we certainly don't have loads of big windows. They're all quite small, deep, you know, cottagey windows. So having a space that's nice and warm to start seeds in has been invaluable for me. Okay, so that's most of the annual garden that I've got on the go at the moment. I'll take you to see the chickens real quick, and I'll show you a couple of bits in the food forest. The food forest mostly loses my attention at this time of year because there's so much to do out here, and just in terms of maintenance on the whole, you know, on the land, everything just goes nuts. All the hedgerows, all the grass and all of that. And a lot of the stuff in my food forest is brand new. You know, I've only lived here 2 years, so the food forest, everything is kind of 18 months or younger, so it's not had loads of time to establish. So I'm just making sure that I keep putting new things in every winter, every spring. More of a long-term game, if you know what I mean. So let's go see it. We'll go collect the eggs and see some of the things that are going on back there. Before we head down there, just showing you the ground cover here. It's mostly clover, both red and white, and it is all in flower at the moment, and it's just beautiful. Hello, ladies. So we were unfortunately discovered by the local fox, and we did lose a chicken. So I'm down to 10 chickens. So they are, at least at the moment, we're being really tight on security with them. So they're still coming out into this outer run bit, but only when I'm like directly here to supervise them and the dogs are out and things like that. And we'd had them for over a year without any problems whatsoever. But you know, once they find you, they know where you are, don't they? So we've got to really tighten it up. That was a few weeks ago, and we've not had any more losses since. So yeah, it was rubbish. But I think hopefully the system is working now, and we're doing a lot of work on our outer fencing. So RIP Big Red. We did also find that crows were getting the eggs. We'd only know because you'd see the shells sort of sprinkled back over to that tree line over there, which is where they all seem to be. So keeping the enclosure door, the run door closed until we come down here, let the chickens out, collect the eggs, means that we're not losing eggs to the crows. It's not the end of the world to lose a few eggs here and there, but I just don't want to be inviting the crows over here on a regular basis. I don't want to make it easy for them. So we're keeping the chickens safe, and we are discouraging the crows all in one go. So hopefully we got a handle on things. They do just love being out so much that I don't want to shut them away in a tiny enclosure if I don't have to, but at the same time I want to keep them safe. So it's a balancing act. Hi. No, hey. Otherwise in this food forest, everything's just kind of cracking on. Most of the fruit trees look all right. As I say, we've had way less harsh, stormy weather this year. I won't show you everything in here. I'll save that for another video, but a couple of little highlights I think I will show you. Over here are the Welsh onions. They're in flower at the moment, and the bees just absolutely love them. I have separated them out, so I've got them dotted around all over the place now, and I've got some more started from seed. So I am going to just basically have Welsh onions everywhere, because then I just think I will never want for onions, and I can lower the number that I need to grow in the annual garden. But I have proof of concept now that these can survive here, they can thrive here, they propagate themselves here, they bunch out. So I was able to dig up a clump, separate it, replant them wherever I want to propagate, or indeed go ahead and eat them. So I think as long as I keep growing the numbers, I can be fairly confident that I'll always have some kind of onion to eat. So this bed behind me here was a new bed that I started over the winter, and I really have my fingers crossed for it, because nothing looked too great in the early spring, but it has started to take off now. So I've got some gooseberry plants in there, and I wasn't expecting anything from them this year because they went in this winter, so they're brand new, but they do have fruits on them, so that's really, really nice, and they are starting to ripen, so we should get some gooseberries this year. A lot of they were loaded with fruit, and a lot of them have fallen off, but I think that's probably for the best. I think there was too much on there for such a tiny plant to actually sustain. So obviously it's only the first year for them, but it gives me lots of hope that we'll be getting gooseberries in the future. And then other bits I've got dotted around in here, they're starting to take off. So this is a nice big yarrow. He's really establishing in here now, so that's lovely. I've got some verbena and some lavender back here, which are taking off. These lupins are new this year, so hopefully we'll get some perennial flowers that are going to come back year after year, and really establish this space. And then as you can see, there's some borage, and then the chamomile. I assume that now I've put chamomile in here, I will have chamomile forever, but I'm okay with that. That can cover the ground in here. And then I've popped this thyme in, which also seems to be establishing itself now. So I have high hopes for this bed, that it's going to be a really, really nice perennial space with lots of different useful edible things in it, and then just some pretty things and some things for the pollinators. Another plant my neighbour gave me is this lovely echium. So he's got them all over his orchard, and said they are going to try and take over a little bit, but did I want one because the bees love them? So yes please. Yeah. anything that's going to take over in a place where I've otherwise got grass, I don't mind if it gives the grass a run for its money. So he gave me one of these, and I left it in a pot for too long. I kind of forgot about it, but I popped it in this spring and it has just taken off, and the bees do in fact love it. Okay, before I wrap it up for today, I'm just going to show you a couple of little bits over here. I want to keep you up to date with the herb spiral, because I know I showed you that going in. It has done surprisingly well. I'm so chuffed. The sage has just taken over. That is just the happiest thing I think I've ever grown ever. So we are enjoying lots of sage, which is lovely. But even the rosemary and the thyme are establishing themselves, putting on loads of growth, so I'm super chuffed with that. In terms of other perennial bits I've got in there, I've got some chives which are doing great, the oregano and the marjoram. The oregano is, oh, there's a fly on you. The oregano is, yeah, it's gone nuts. The marjoram is slowly catching up, but it does seem quite happy now, so that's good. I popped in some parsley and that has disappeared, I think, so I might have to put some more annual herbs in there to fill it out. But I'm not sad if it's going to be a perennial space, that I just pop the odd thing in here and there each year to fill it out if there's any gaps. Yeah, I'm really chuffed with how it looks. It's a bit weedy at the moment, I'll get around to that, but I just want to show you how everything is getting established. And then over in this bed, this has been my catch-all bed, so for anything perennial that I've started or propagated and I don't know where to put it, I made a bed early in the year. I thought any of those things I can just end up bunging in here. And this lavender is absolutely living the dream, and I've always struggled to keep lavender alive. It's a Mediterranean shrub basically, and I do not live in a Mediterranean climate, but he's been in over winter and putting on the best show. Also, my cineraria is loving life, so they are dominating at the moment, but the lupins in here are also seem pretty happy. Again, it's a bit weedy, I'm going to come back to that, but I just thought I'd show you now. Everything else is just kind of cracking on out here. I'll do more detailed bits on certain areas as the summer goes on, I'm sure, but that is just to get you up to date with how things are going. And otherwise, I'll just show you how the garden progresses this year, as more and more things seem to be ready for harvest. So thank you so much, and let's catch up soon.